Why thinking became quantified. Thinking once felt fluid. Ideas were explored, debated, and shaped by conversation. Then thought began to be counted. To understand how thinking became quantified, we need to return to a time when reasoning was qualitative. Arguments were judged by coherence, persuasion, and insight. A good idea was one that made sense, not one that scored well. This mattered because thinking was expressive. It allowed ambiguity. Disagreement could coexist. Understanding grew through dialogue rather than measurement. Intelligence was recognized, not ranked. The diversity of human thought was understood as a natural feature of communities, not as a hierarchy to be organized and optimized. Then measurement entered cognition. Tests scored reasoning. Metrics tracked performance. Decisions demanded benchmarks. Thinking became something that could be evaluated numerically. The process that had once been valued for its richness, its unpredictability, and its capacity to surprise was reduced to a set of variables that could be tracked, compared, and ranked on a standardized scale. At first, this felt fair. Comparison replaced favoritism. Ability could be identified objectively. Improvement could be measured. Numbers promised clarity where judgment felt biased. The appeal of quantification was rooted in its apparent objectivity, its ability to treat every individual by the same standard and produce results that seemed untouched by personal preference or prejudice. But something subtle shifted. Thinking began adapting to what was measured. Speed mattered more than depth. Correctness mattered more than insight. Exploration gave way to optimization. The open-ended pursuit of understanding, which had always been the engine of intellectual progress, was replaced by the focused pursuit of measurable improvement. Thinking became less about discovery and more about performance. Over time, reasoning was shaped by scores. Intelligence became a number. Success became a percentile. An individual's intellectual capacity was expressed as a position within a distribution, a number that located them relative to everyone else rather than describing the actual character and quality of their thought. Thought was no longer just something you did. It was something you produced and compared. This was a turning point. Thinking stopped being a process. It became an output. And once thought could be quantified, it began orbiting the measurement itself, not the understanding it was meant to create. As thinking was quantified, behavior adjusted to the metrics. People learned how to perform intelligence instead of developing it. Strategies optimized scores. Shortcuts replaced exploration. What counted mattered more than what connected. The aspects of thought that were most easily captured by metrics, speed, accuracy, and volume, became the definition of intelligence, while the aspects that resisted measurement, such as creativity, empathy, and contextual judgment, were gradually devalued. This felt efficient. Progress could be tracked. Talent could be sorted. Systems could scale education and evaluation. But quantification also narrowed the definition of thinking itself. What could not be measured struggled to survive. This mattered because creativity, insight, and wisdom resist clean metrics. They unfold unevenly. They take time. When thinking was measured continuously, slow ideas looked weak. Complex thoughts looked inefficient. The kind of reasoning that requires time to develop, that unfolds through stages of confusion and clarification before arriving at insight, was penalized by systems designed to reward rapid, measurable output. Over time, internal motivation shifted. Curiosity faded. Incentives took over. The natural drive to understand, which had always been the deepest motivation for thinking, was gradually displaced by the extrinsic rewards attached to measurable performance. People thought not because they wanted to know, but because they wanted to score. People thought toward outcomes instead of understanding. The question changed from what makes sense to what scores well. The conflict emerged quietly. Thinking improved by the numbers, yet felt thinner. Output increased. Depth declined. Mind became busy but less reflective. The constant pressure to produce measurable results left no space for the kind of unstructured thinking that has historically been the source of the most significant breakthroughs in human understanding. Quantification did not ruin thinking. It trained it. And training always favors what is rewarded, not necessarily what is needed. The conflict reached its peak when quantified thinking began defining worth. Scores followed people through life. Rankings shaped opportunity. A narrow slice of cognition gained power over identity. This is the emotional breaking point. People felt reduced to numbers that could not capture how they actually thought. Strengths went unseen. Weaknesses were amplified. The measurement became the message. Mathematically, nothing was incorrect. The metrics were consistent. The comparisons were fair within their definitions. But definitions had hardened. Thinking that fell outside the measure frame was treated as inferior, not different. The narrowness of the metrics was mistaken for comprehensiveness, and forms of intelligence that the tests could not capture were effectively rendered invisible by the system designed to evaluate them. This reshaped behavior deeply. Risk-taking declined. Original ideas were avoided because they scored unpredictably. The penalty for unconventional thinking, which might produce a brilliant insight or a complete failure, was too high in a system that rewarded consistent, predictable performance above all else. Safe answers replaced honest exploration. Thought became cautious, optimized to fit the system. The deeper tension was existential. When thinking is quantified, self-worth becomes external. Progress feels conditional. Identity becomes negotiable. The sense of who one is as a thinker, a learner, a contributor to understanding, becomes contingent on external evaluation rather than internal experience. The result is a fragile self-concept that fluctuates with every test result and performance review. The mind stops asking what it wants to understand and starts asking how it will be evaluated. This reorientation of thought, from intrinsic curiosity to extrinsic measurement, represents one of the most significant psychological consequences of quantification, because it changes not just what people think about, but why they think at all. The conflict was no longer about learning. It was about survival within measurement, and survival rarely rewards depth. The resolution begins when thinking is reclaimed as more than a score. Measurement can reveal patterns, but it cannot define intelligence. Once this boundary is restored, numbers lose their grip without losing their usefulness. This changes how thinking is valued. Metrics become signals, not identities. Performance is contextualized. Slow insight is protected. Depth is allowed to mature without immediate proof of value. The deeper lesson is restraint. What can be measured is not all that matters. Quantification narrows attention, but understanding requires breadth. When thinking is freed from constant evaluation, curiosity returns. Thinking became quantified because systems needed comparison, but understanding was never meant to compete. It was meant to explore. When thought is treated as output, it shrinks. When it is treated as process, it expands. The challenge now is balance. To use numbers without becoming them, to measure without reducing, and to remember that the most important ideas often emerge where metrics cannot reach, in the spaces between what is measured, in the questions that no test thinks to ask, and kind of slow, patient thinking that refuses to be hurried by the demands of evaluation. Subscribe to join the journey.